The room went dead silent the second the final document hit the table. No raised voices, no dramatic speeches, just one brutal sentence in a sealed legal file that instantly stripped Queen Camilla of every ounce of leverage she thought she had. Diana's private jewel vault, headlined by the iconic Spencer Tiara, was not going to the crown. It was not going to the reigning queen. It was passing entirely and exclusively to 11-year-old Princess Charlotte. When the solicitors confirmed the ruling, Camilla didn't just lose her composure. She went completely ballistic behind closed doors, confronting Charles and demanding to know how a dead princess was still running the palace from beyond the grave. Before we unlock the secret codicil that pushed the royal household to the brink of collapse, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss another deep dive into palace power plays. The Queen tightened her fingers around the polished mahogany armrest until her knuckles turned white, listening to the legal term sole beneficiary echo off the high ceilings of Clarence House. In plain language, Charlotte held absolute ownership. These were not public heirlooms stored in the Tower of London for state occasions. These were Diana's personal, privately owned possessions, pieces that had been legally isolated from the official royal collection decades ago. That single distinction meant the monarch had zero control over them. It meant the Spencer Tiara was completely out of Camilla's reach forever. Charles stared at his wife as her face drained of color, feeling the walls of the drawing room close in on them. He wanted to intervene. He wanted to shield her from the public humiliation. Yet he knew that questioning the estate trustees would only highlight their total powerlessness. The king stayed dead quiet. The atmosphere inside the room turned suffocatingly tense. Every tick of the grandfather clock felt like a deliberate reminder of an authority that Charles and Camilla could not bend. For years, the palace had managed to quietly reassign historical pieces, smoothing over personal history with grand ceremonial titles. But this was different. This was an unyielding wall, built by private estate lawyers back in 1996. A wall designed specifically to withstand the weight of the sovereign's throne. Camilla snapped at the solicitors, asking if temporary loan rights could at least be granted for an upcoming international summit. The answer came without hesitation, cold, unyielding, final. She held no veto. She held no loan access. She held zero legal standing. Frustrated, Camilla reached across the table to grab the velvet folder herself. Senior trustee Eleanor Ashcombe didn't hesitate. She placed her hand flat across the cover, physically blocking the Queen Consort. Only Princess Charlotte, her legal guardians, and the appointed trust administrators were legally permitted to view the full inventory. Think about that image. The Queen of England, sitting directly beside the sovereign, wearing the highest ceremonial title in the realm, completely stopped in her tracks by a single hand defending Diana's final boundary. Hi viewers, if you were standing in William's shoes right now, would you defend your mother's private legacy, no matter the family chaos, or would you give in to keep peace in the palace? Drop a fast defend or peace in the comments below. The heavy grandfather clock in the corner kept ticking. The faint scratching of legal fountain pens sounded like iron dragging across stone. Prince William stood silently near the curtained window, watching the scene unfold, while noticing a detail everyone else had glossed over. Near the bottom of the unsealed ledger, right next to a confidential listing, was a handwritten note scribbled in blue ink. It was a handwriting he knew by heart. "To be opened only when my granddaughter is ready," the prince read to himself. This wasn't just a transfer of priceless gemstones. Diana had planted a temporal landmine across generations, and Charlotte was the one chosen to detonate it. To the public, these were dazzling museum pieces. To Charlotte, they were tangible pieces of a grandmother she only knew through stories. To William, they were painful reminders of a mother whose sudden loss still shadowed every corridor in the palace. But to Camilla, that locked vault was a psychological nightmare. It was a permanent, unbreakable wall constructed by Diana in 1996, guaranteeing that the woman who replaced her could never fully claim her shadow. For decades, the palace household had operated on the unspoken assumption that time would heal old divisions, that official titles would eventually overshadow personal memory. Yet, standing in that room, the senior courtiers realized how completely they had miscalculated. Diana had not left her personal belongings to chance, nor had she left them to the discretion of institutional advisors. She had placed them under the protection of independent custodians, who answered only to the exact wording of her final directives. Camilla had spent over 30 years navigating public hostility, fighting for legitimacy, and building her place at the heart of the monarchy. Yet in less than 10 minutes, one leather folder made it crystal clear that rank means nothing against a binding trust. No crown could override that legacy. No palace press release could spin it away. King Charles picked up the partial document, scanning the entries until his eyes locked onto one specific item. A private sapphire brooch was listed, a piece Diana wore during their explosive final private meeting before her death, an encounter erased from official palace logs. Charles went pale as paper. He remembered every bitter word from that afternoon. He remembered the silence that followed. He realized right then why that brooch had vanished from public sight for 30 years. The memory hit the king with physical force. It was a stark reminder that while official records could be rewritten and public schedules rearranged, private truth remained locked within those legal files. Every item in that inventory carried a story, a specific moment of friction, and a clear boundary that no royal decree could erase. Why did the legal team choose this exact week to confirm the inheritance? The timing wasn't random. It was an automatic response, triggered when someone inside the palace tried to manipulate the rules. The truth didn't start in the solicitor's office. It started 3 months earlier inside a secure exhibit room at Windsor Castle, where a single subtle move by Camilla set off a legal chain reaction that blew up right in her face. During that closed-door gathering at Windsor, surrounded by historic displays prepared for an upcoming ceremonial event, Camilla had quietly indicated her desire to integrate several key pieces from Diana's private vault into the main crown collection. She believed that enough time had passed, that her elevated status as Queen Consort granted her the authority to streamline the royal jewel archives. It seemed like a minor administrative request, a simple shift of inventory cards. But the independent trustees monitoring the collection recognized it immediately for what it was, an attempt to absorb Diana's private estate into institutional control. The moment that formal request was logged, the protective mechanism within the 1996 trust activated automatically. Clauses that had laid dormant for 30 years suddenly sprang to life, initiating a mandatory legal review that bypassed the king entirely. Camilla's effort to consolidate her authority had accomplished the exact opposite. It forced the solicitors to step forward and legally shut her out forever. Camilla demanded to know if the legal team could be overruled by royal prerogative. Eleanor Ashcombe slowly picked up her leather case and closed the brass lock with a loud, metallic click. The legal wall was impenetrable. The king had no power to break it. The Queen had nowhere left to push. And as the trustees walked out of Clarence House into the grey London fog, Camilla was left pacing the room in absolute disbelief, completely unaware that her own desperate grab for Diana's jewellery months earlier was the exact key that locked her out forever. To uncover how the velvet-bound ledger came to crush Camilla's ambitions in that Clarence House drawing room, we have to rewind the clock 90 days. We have to travel back to a rain-swept afternoon at Windsor Castle. The room was the private gallery in the upper ward. High ceilings, heavy oak panelling, the scent of beeswax, old parchment, and polished mahogany. Glass display cases had been wheeled in under heavy guard for a private family viewing prior to a major international anniversary reception. No cameras, no press, no royal reporters hovering with notepads. Just senior members of the royal household walking among centuries of diamonds, emeralds, and historical heirlooms. Camilla walked slowly down the central aisle. Her eyes moved across the velvet-lined trays. She was looking for pieces that would project absolute authority for her next state appearance. Then she stopped. Resting inside a brass-framed display case was Diana's iconic sapphire and pearl necklace, alongside the dazzling Spencer Tiara. The pieces practically hummed under the subtle gallery spotlights. Beside the tray sat a small white index card, detailing its provenance. Camilla picked up the display card. She turned to the Palace Collection supervisor, who was standing quietly with hands clasped behind his back. She did not ask a question. She gave an instruction. She directed the supervisor to prepare the sapphire piece and the Spencer Tiara for reclassification. She wanted them transferred into the official Crown Collection, the public registry of jewels designated for the reigning Queen's official use. It was a casual move. It lasted less than 60 seconds. Yet it struck the silent room with the sudden force of a seismic shift. Prince William was standing only 10 feet away, talking quietly with Catherine. He heard every single word. He turned slowly. His face went completely still. William stepped forward, keeping his posture rigid and his hands at his sides. He did not shout. He did not lose his temper. But when he spoke, his voice cut clean through the quiet air of the gallery. He reminded the Queen Consort that the necklace and the tiara were non-crown assets. They were personal possessions belonging strictly to his mother's private estate. They were never intended for general institutional use. They were never meant to be absorbed by the monarchy. Camilla did not back down. She held her ground, arguing that living history must serve the immediate needs of the active monarchy. She tapped the display card against her palm, as if the matter were already settled. That was when Catherine acted. Without saying a single word, Catherine stepped between them. She reached out gently, took the white display card straight from Camilla's fingers, and placed it precisely back onto the velvet tray beside the sapphire necklace. 0 words spoken, complete visual dominance. Camilla froze. Charles watched the entire exchange from the doorway, trapped between his wife's ambition and his son's fierce protectiveness. The king said nothing. What Camilla did not realize was that a quiet man in a dark charcoal suit was standing near the back of the exhibit room. He was an independent record keeper representing Diana's legal estate trust. That very evening, a formal report was logged under reference code 481WW. It documented the Queen Consort's direct request to absorb private estate assets into Crown control. And that brief log entry triggered a hidden mechanism. Back in 1996, during the bitter finalization of her divorce settlement, Diana had insisted on inserting a legal tripwire into her estate trust. It was known internally as the Dormant Protection Clause. The rule was explicit. If any representative of the reigning monarch ever attempted to seize, borrow, or legally reclassify her private personal assets, the entire vault would immediately lock down. It would automatically trigger a full legal transfer of ownership directly to her female line descendants upon confirmation by independent trustees. Diana built that defense because she knew how institutions operate. She knew how easily private history gets rewritten once a person is gone. Camilla's 60-second demand at Windsor had not secured her the tiara. It had sprung Diana's 30-year-old trap. When Camilla eventually discovered that her request at Windsor was the exact move that triggered the total forfeiture of the jewel vault, her reaction behind closed doors was explosive. She felt humiliated. She felt set up. She felt as though the entire Wales family was orchestrating an institutional coup against her authority. She bypassed King Charles entirely. She demanded an immediate, face-to-face meeting with Prince William. No aides, no secretaries, no advisors standing by the door to smooth over sharp edges. By 7 o'clock the following evening, two people carrying 30 years of unspoken resentment were standing alone inside a private drawing room at Windsor Castle. The heavy double doors clicked shut, and the ultimate palace showdown began. Camilla stood near the marble fireplace, holding a copy of the legal notice tightly in her right hand. Her composure was gone. She demanded to know if William had engineered the legal audit specifically to inflict maximum public damage on her standing. She accused him of turning his mother's memory into a weapon to undermine her position beside the king. William did not flinch. He stood near the center of the room with his arms folded, completely unbothered by her anger. When he spoke, his voice was measured, cold, and razor-sharp. He told her plainly that he did not write his mother's estate trust, but he would enforce every single word of it to protect his daughter. Camilla slammed the legal document onto the polished table between them. The paper slid across the wood and hit the edge of William's jacket. She insisted that wearing a historic tiara at a state occasion honored royal continuity rather than erasing anyone. William did not pick up the paper. He simply slid it back across the table toward her without breaking eye contact. Then came the line that stopped the conversation dead in its tracks. "Honor," William said quietly, "cannot begin by taking something after its owner explicitly withheld permission." The words hit the drawing room like an iron door slamming shut. Camilla tried to dismiss the entire conflict as a simple misunderstanding among family members. William cut her off instantly. He revealed that the independent legal counsel had already reviewed the trustee log from the Windsor Castle viewing. The paper trail was complete. The formal request to reclassify the Spencer Tiara as a crown asset was officially documented. It was no longer a family debate. It was an established legal breach. The Queen Consort looked toward the closed double doors, realizing for the first time that her royal title gave her zero leverage in this room. William stepped toward the exit. Before opening the door, he turned back to face her one last time. He warned her that the final resolution was no longer up to him, nor was it up to the king. Independent trustee Eleanor Ashcombe was already on her way to present the final binding terms directly to Charles. Later that afternoon, inside a private study at Clarence House, King Charles made one last desperate attempt to intervene. He sat across from Eleanor Ashcombe. The king asked whether a single piece, just one private brooch or temporary loan of the Spencer Tiara, could be granted to Camilla for ceremonial balance. Eleanor Ashcombe looked directly at the sovereign. She did not hesitate. She closed her leather document case, turned the small brass key in the lock, and delivered a single-word response. Number. The legal battle was finished. The monarch had been formally stripped of jurisdiction over his late wife's private treasures. Yet, as the legal doors slammed shut on Camilla's ambitions, an even larger mystery began to surface from inside the sealed vault. What was the true purpose of the unlisted item labeled the Spencer key in the private ledger? And what secret message was waiting for Princess Charlotte when she finally turned 11? The answers were about to move out of the solicitors' offices and straight into the private quarters of Kensington Palace, setting the stage for a final reckoning that no public relations campaign could ever control. Stripped of every legal remedy, Camilla retreated deep into the private wing of Clarence House. The institutional authority she had spent decades cultivating could not breach the legal vault. Behind closed doors, she removed her royal brooch, set it heavily on the dressing table, and requested total isolation. The defeat was absolute. No public statement could reframe it. No official schedule could obscure the stark reality that Diana's final boundary remained unyielding. Meanwhile, miles away inside apartment 1A at Kensington Palace, a very different scene was unfolding. The evening light filtered softly through the tall windows. Eleanor Ashcombe had delivered a handwritten, certified copy of the partial inventory directly to Prince William and Catherine. The document contained details that had remained sealed for 30 years. Hidden within the precise legal descriptions of sapphires, pearls, and platinum were notes detailing small, hidden inscriptions carved beneath the settings of specific pieces. Personal messages, written by Diana, meant exclusively for the future women of her bloodline. And then, Catherine stopped reading. Her eyes rested on an unlisted item recorded simply as the Spencer key. It was not a gemstone. It was not a piece of ceremonial wear. It was a custom physical key, forged from antique silver, designed to unlock a secondary private compartment within the estate vault, a compartment that contained Diana's unedited personal journals from 1996. That key was legally assigned to Charlotte alone. William and Catherine knew they had to protect their 11-year-old daughter from the institutional warfare brewing outside their doors. They chose to speak with her privately, away from palace aides, secretaries, and press officers. They sat together in Charlotte's quiet room. William carefully explained why her grandmother had established the trust decades ago. He spoke of protection, legacy, and memory. Charlotte listened in complete silence. She did not ask about the monetary value of the Spencer Tiara. She did not ask when she could wear the legendary jewels in public. Instead, she looked up at her father and asked a question that brought a sudden, heavy silence to the room. Was grandmother afraid people would forget who she really was? The question hit William with immense emotional force. His voice tightened as he answered. He explained that the collection was never meant to showcase status or achieve victory over anyone. It was a quiet promise across generations. What happened next shifted the entire trajectory of the family crisis. Princess Charlotte picked up a sheet of simple writing paper. Without any prompt from her parents, she wrote a brief private letter addressed directly to Queen Camilla. She wrote that she never wanted the inheritance to bring pain to the household. She promised to honor the collection with quiet respect, humility, and dignity, rather than using it as a symbol of triumph. Charlotte folded the paper, placed it inside a plain white envelope, and sealed it with simple red wax. The next morning, the letter was delivered to Clarence House. Camilla read the handwritten words alone in her study. As her finger traced Charlotte's signature, the Queen Consort broke down in tears. The political struggle had ended. The child she had feared as a living symbol of Diana's shadow had answered institutional tension with pure, unprompted grace. Yet, privacy inside palace walls never lasts for long. By sunrise the following day, news of the trustee ruling leaked to international news outlets. Global headlines erupted with details of the legal transfer. Broadcast networks immediately framed the decision as a decisive victory for Diana's bloodline. But it was an image outside the gates of Kensington Palace that captured the nation's attention. A single photograph began circulating worldwide. It showed a solitary white rose resting against the memorial gates, accompanied by a small card reading, "Her story is safe with Charlotte." The palace press office was forced to act. Under strict instructions from King Charles, the official statement was kept cold, brief, and legally precise. It confirmed Princess Charlotte as the sole lawful beneficiary of the private estate trust. It declared that the Crown would respect the binding legal structure without challenge or appeal. With that single statement, all institutional efforts to absorb the Spencer Tiara collapsed. A private family meeting was called at Kensington Palace to mark the final resolution. No press was permitted, no official photographers were present. King Charles and Queen Camilla arrived quietly. When Charlotte walked into the drawing room, Camilla approached the young princess first. She thanked Charlotte for the handwritten note. Then, in a low, steady voice, Camilla formally stated that she would never request access to the vault again. The long shadow of institutional rivalry finally receded. Eleanor Ashcombe stepped forward and handed the physical brass key of the outer estate vault to Prince William. It will remain in his safekeeping until Charlotte reaches the age of majority. The legal battle was over. The boundary written 30 years ago stood absolute and unalterable. Diana's private history passed safely into the hands of a granddaughter, determined to guard it with dignity, truth, and genuine compassion. The vault was locked, the dispute was settled, or so the palace thought. Because as Eleanor Ashcombe departed Kensington Palace, a secondary legal file marked 1996 Confidential Express was quietly transferred to a high-security vault in Edinburgh. That hidden folder contains an unreleased recording made by Diana just 48 hours before her passing. A recording that explicitly names a senior palace official who attempted to alter her original will. Next time, we pull back the curtain on that secret recording and reveal the exact identity exposed in the Edinburgh vault. You cannot afford to miss what happens when that final tape is unsealed. Make sure to subscribe and turn on all notifications right now.